Hi, thanks for tuning in today to Front Porch Conversations here at Advent Christian Village. I want to welcome our guests and introduce them to you, Dan and Judy Hodge. Welcome. We're so glad you could be with us, and we're so glad you're now at Advent Christian Village.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
And it's been fairly recent that you've moved. Is that correct?
3 months.
3 months. And you live at Dowling House. And we'll learn more about you as we go. But Dan, why don't you begin by telling us where you were born and where you grew up?
I was born in Covington, Kentucky. My dad was not long before I was born, he was sent to Germany during the Korean conflict, and they had to call him to come back to be in Covington when I was born. And when I was small, we moved to Chillicothe, Ohio, and lived there for a few years. And then in 1960, we moved to Florida. I was 8 years old, and lived in Lakeland, Florida until 1967 when we moved to Jasper, Florida, and that's where I met Judy.
Well, that's quite a little adventure so far. It's so early in your life. What about you, Judy?
I was raised in Jasper, just a few miles down the road. My parents were both born and raised in Jasper, so we have an association with Hamilton County since, I think, the late 1800s.
So you're longtime Floridians.
Long time, all my life till I got married.
Well, we're glad. Now, I know there's some more things about your wedding, but let us hear about what you did as far as education and early careers.
Well, we both graduated from Hamilton County High School. I had a scholarship at the University of Florida, teacher scholarship, and turned that down to enter the ministry. Went to Atlanta Christian College in East Point, Georgia, graduated there in 1980. But then when I was in my late 40s, I felt a call to go into the public school classroom. I went back to school at Lander University in Greenwood, South Carolina, and got my elementary education degree. And then a few years later, I earned my Master of Education from Southern Wesleyan in Central South Carolina.
And what about you, Judy?
I was glad to get out of high school. I went to Georgia Southwestern College in Americus, Georgia for a while, and then I transferred and went to Atlanta Christian College where Dan was for a year. But I never completed college, much to my mother's dismay. But I was a housewife. Thankfully, most of the years I was able to raise our children, and I kept all 5 of the grandchildren until they started school.
So I'm assuming you met in school.
High school.
High school. And
First day I transferred into high school in geometry class. And Judy was the only 11th grader in the class. And we got there in January, and the only seat that was available was on the front row, and it happened to be right in front of her.
And I always ask both people in the couple, is that the way you heard the story? Is that what your story is too?
Yes. Yeah. Except that I was sitting there crying because I was failing geometry. I was not good in math.
Was Dan a help to you in geometry?
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am. He pulled me through that year.
She got called to the board. I figured the problem out on a piece of paper and handed it to her. She went up to the board so she could do it.
Well, it was meant to be then, at least for getting, and then how much later after that did you get married?
Not too long.
3 years.
Yeah. We got married June 1971. He'd been out of high school a year, and I'd been out 2 years. So not long after graduation.
And I guess it's worked out pretty well, because you said you had just celebrated your 50th wedding anniversary.
Yeah, we fought it out after we decided we weren't going to kill each other. We did pretty good.
And what do you attribute how you worked it out to?
We talk a lot. We laugh a lot.
And some of us know how to keep our mouths shut when it's necessary.
Dan, when you were at seminary, what did you feel a call, or what made you feel the call to go to seminary, first of all?
I have felt the call since I was about 12 years old. I was greatly influenced by a couple of preachers that we knew. Once I got to school, I was pretty well convinced that's what I was going to end up doing with my life. And it's one of those things that if you ever feel the call and God ever calls you to ministry, you say no at your own peril. And I felt like that's what the Lord wanted me to do.
And what about you, Judy? Did you grow
All my life, I wanted to be a mother and a wife and take care of the home and be a housewife. And I've worked outside the home at various times, but I always needed to be at home with my children. And Dan worked, sometimes he worked a couple of jobs so that I was able to. So I always appreciated that from him.
And did you grow up in a Christian home?
Sort of. We went to church every Sunday. I grew up in Devonia Baptist Church out there between Jasper and Live Oak. That was my home church. And we went very regularly, and then my dad got upset with something. I don't remember what. I don't know the details, but he quit going. And so I kind of went on my own when I was in high school. So, I don't know that we actually lived... We lived a good life, but I wouldn't say it was a Christian home, per se.
And were you at all hesitant when Dan told you he wanted to go to seminary and into ministry?
Not really. It didn't. I was afraid of how I would be able to handle the job, because it is a job. And it was, people always ask me what my job is in the church, and I say my job is to take care of the preacher. And I make sure he has what he needs, and I always supported him in everything he did and wherever we went. And no, it didn't really, because I always knew from the time I met him, he was preparing for the ministry. So it wasn't a surprise or anything.
Where was your first church, Dan?
My first full-time church was in Sylvania, Georgia, First Christian Church of Sylvania. And I started there in my junior year, going down on the weekends. And by Christmas, they'd asked us if I would mind moving to Sylvania and travel back and forth each week to school. And we did that. We moved in the fall of '78, and that was our first church.
And how long were you there?
3 years. When we left there, we went to... trying to get everything straight. Douglasville, Georgia, and then in November of '82 we came to Hampton, South Carolina, and pretty much stayed in Hampton and South Carolina for about 40 years.
40?
Not at
the same church.
Right.
In South Carolina.
I just wanted to be sure I heard it right.
Yeah.
That's quite a long time.
We did stay 18 years in Greenwood, South Carolina. That was the longest.
And tell us about your children.
We have a daughter, Dana Silver. Our oldest daughter is a medical records director in a small nursing home in Greenwood, South Carolina. She is divorced. She has one daughter, Bethany, that's soon to be 26, I guess next week. And we have a daughter, Karen, whose husband is in the Army. They are in Des Moines, Iowa. They have 2 children. Jack is 23, 22, and Caitlin is 21. And then we have a son, Mark, who is in Greenwood, South Carolina as well. His wife is a high school band director, and he helps her a lot. He's disabled with his back. And they have 2 children, Emma, who's just in her first year of college, and Addison, who's a sophomore this year.
Sounds like a nice big family.
It is. Big enough for us. We miss them.
When you did the celebration for your 50th anniversary, were they all able to be there?
Yes, everybody. We rented one big house, and we all stayed together. It was perfect. Everything about it was perfect.
And then share with us where that was.
Pigeon Forge.
And you actually had a ceremony?
We did, at a little chapel. It was very sweet, very touching, very pretty. The fellow that did it did a super good job. It was a lot of fun. It was everything I wanted.
Good.
Yeah.
And did you sign up for another 50 years together?
I don't know.
Well, I did anyway.
We've made it this long. We'll keep on going.
That's great. And you have both of you have a connection, but talk about a little bit about your connection to the village.
The first, I really, even growing up close by, I was not real familiar with the village. I was not real familiar with Advent Christian Church, even though there is one in Jasper, and I did have some cousins that went there, but I wasn't real familiar with it. But my first connection with the village was when my sister planned our family reunions out here. And we came out here for 15 years for the family reunions. In 1999, my mother moved out here. She lived in Carter House, and then went to Dossier, and then died at Good Sam. And she was out here 13 years altogether. So we came quite often when she was here. And we always said when we retired, this is where we would like to be.
And your sister is also living
My
here?
sister's here. We are the only two left in our family. We have a brother-in-law in Tennessee, but we've lost a brother and two sisters, and mom and daddy. So it's just the two of them. We were the two last ones in the family, the two youngest ones, and so we're all that's left now.
We'll share with our viewers who your sister is.
Elisa Stats is my sister.
And she also lives in Dowling.
She lives in Dowling House. She's on the second floor. We're on the fourth. So I've enjoyed being close to her.
Dan, what about you? Do you have any family in the area other than?
No, we moved here from Lakeland in 1967. My dad was with Occidental and was transferred to the research division up in White Springs. So I don't have any family here. Most of the family I do have lives in the Atlanta or near the Atlanta area.
Well, I'm certainly glad you agreed to come as well.
I am too.
I'll just tell our viewers, it's interesting getting to meet new people, and we met at a Christmas program here at the village. And Dan, I hear you have some really good stories. Do you have a story you want to share with us?
My kids, when they look at me, they say, Daddy's always been a lot of fun. And I've tried to make life enjoyable for them. Of course, we have to deal with discipline and things like that. But we were on a trip one time, went to Statesboro, Georgia, and I pretty much showed out that day. My daughter went into the restroom. It was one of these that had one door on the outside, then a little room, and then with the two doors for the men and women. So I stood on the outer door, was going to wait until she came out and scare her, just jump at her. Door opened, I jumped, I hollered, and there was a little child about 8 years old whose eyes were as big as pipes. And I looked around, and there was his father, who was about 6'3", weighed about 280, and I knew I had done it then. And then Karen walked out, and she just turned beet red, because she knew what I had done. Well, the day wasn't over. We went back to our seats, had our meal, got ready to leave, and when I stood up, I hit my head on the light fixture, which was shaped like a bell and rang like one. And we got outside, and Karen says, "I'm never going anywhere with you again."
But I bet she's eaten those words, hadn't she?
Yes, she is.
We always had a good time everywhere we went. Always had fun.
Well, I have friends who fathers were preachers. Were they often in your sermons?
No.
Very rarely. I never used my family much as illustrations. I really had no reason why, but other than the fact that I guess a lot of times when preachers use those illustrations, the family member ends up being the butt of the joke or something like that, and I did not want that for my family.
Humor is an important thing in our life, both for good and for bad, and that would be an example, I think, of hurting somebody through humor. And
I have had time though that one time Judy had stayed home with one of the children.
I don't remember the circumstances.
But the kids were there with me at church by ourselves, and Judy was at home. And during the sermon, the kids got cutting up a little bit. I stopped the sermon, walked down, and dealt with it, and came back up. And the kids said they'd never have forgotten that.
What have you learned about Advent Christian Village that you didn't know since you, as having now moved here, or that surprised you?
I really don't know of anything because we had been here so much with Mama that I'm not sure that there's anything that was a surprise because we do pretty much everything. And then Lisa's been here a year and a half, so she kind of helped us prepare to move in and to become a part of it. I will say that for the Christmas we have enjoyed all of the Christmas activities, because for most of the last 50 years, if we had a cantata, Dan directed it. If we had a Christmas program, Dan directed it. He did the Advent candles. He did the program for the hanging of the trees. So this is our first year that we just sat back and enjoyed everything. So that was fun for us to be able to enjoy and not to be stressed out over the planning and the preparing.
And Dan, how would you describe your adjustment into retirement from being a pastor?
Since I've retired 3 times before, it hasn't been that much. I have retired from the ministry 3 times, and this is the 3rd and final.
Be careful what you say.
Well, you never retire from ministry,
Right.
but from a paid ministry, I guess.
Right.
I think the most difficult thing is not being in the pulpit on Sundays. That's been the hardest adjustment for me to make, because I love preaching, I love teaching. I was a public school teacher for 10 years, and I've been in the ministry. I started preparation for ministry in 1970, and it's just one of those things, if you've been doing it all your life, it's hard to adjust to sitting in the pew and listening rather than delivering the message.
And tell us about your time in the public schools. Where was it?
Greenwood, South Carolina. I taught middle school, and I was one of the crazy ones. I taught 7th grade. I loved the kids. I taught at 2 different schools, Brewer Middle School and Northside Middle School. I started developing heart problems in 2009 and had to retire. Was forced to retire in 2000, not by the district, but by myself. But I was forced because of medical reasons to retire in 2010. But I loved every minute, and I miss the kids, and I miss teaching.
Well, I would just suggest that you might think about ways to mentor 7th graders, because that's probably an age that really needs it.
I tell him all the time, I didn't even like our own children sometimes at that age. I think it's a difficult age.
I have great respect for middle school teachers, because I would go to, if one of my children was sick or I had to pick them up for a doctor's appointment, and had to go to the office and wait and think, oh my gosh, this is like a combat zone, you know. Just
It can be, but not always.
That's well, and there's just so many things that they have to deal with.
Yeah.
The
And the staff.
years of 7th grade is the most difficult, and you have to prepare them for high school and how high school operates, and it takes a lot of love to stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like teaching is much like ministry. You are called to it or you are not, and those who are called are the ones who stick it out.
Mm-hmm. And who make a lasting impression for the better on young people. Have either of you found ways that you'd like to volunteer now that you're living here?
Well, Lisa asked me if I would like to help with like delivering birthday greetings, and she said she would like to do that, and wondered if I would help her with that. So we're kind of pursuing that a little bit. And Dan didn't mention, but on Sunday afternoons we have 2 ladies on our hall. One from the Christian church here in town, and one from a local Church of Christ, which are very closely related, the Christian church and the Church of Christ. And so they're not able to get out for church. And so we meet with them on Sunday afternoons, and he does a devotional and leads a couple of songs and serve communion, because the Christian church and the Church of Christ both serve communion every Sunday. Mm-hmm. And these 2 ladies have really missed it. So he's kind of carrying on his ministry a little bit that way by meeting with these 2 sweet ladies.
And there may be other people in the village that would be...
You're certainly welcome.
Mm-hmm. And may, from hearing this, know that you're available.
Yeah.
And that time is...
We haven't really settled in enough to look at the different volunteer opportunities. I'm sure we'll get more involved with things as we get more settled in and learn of different activities and things.
And hopefully our activities programs can start back in more full force, and volunteers.
We are working on the Hidden Garden.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, good.
That's right.
Program with the one that's over by Riverwood Apartments and
Riverview.
And
You want to share it with our viewers a little bit about that?
it was a garden that had been set up as a therapy garden when the nursing home was there. it has fallen into disrepair and neglect over the last several years. And Ellie Forster and several others have formed a kind of the Hidden Garden, Friends of the Hidden Garden group. We're meeting January 21st to do our first planting. But they have gone ahead and gone in and cleaned a lot of the beds out in preparation for planting. And there's some other things we'd like to do in there. And anybody's welcome to come and help. I guess ended up being the handicap specialist because I am in a power chair most of the time. And we kind of look at it so it's accessible to everybody.
And that's behind the library near the Riverview Apartments.
Right.
I just left a board meeting for the Garden Club, and that's we were planning on doing some assistance with that as well. And I think that's a great idea.
I miss being outside because for years I did all of our own yard work, planted what little bit of gardens we had, and I miss that. And it's just a good opportunity to get back outside again.
And the weather will be getting nicer soon, but maybe not immediately. So both of you have pretty much always lived in the South.
Yes.
What would you say has changed the most when you moved back to this area?
When we were teenagers out at Interstate 10, there was nothing. It was so empty out between, say, the Ford Place and the interstate. And just to see the growth in new businesses and things in Suwannee County has just been amazing. Even though we did come regularly, and we have seen some of this. Mm-hmm. This is when we were in Jasper when I was little, Live Oak was kind of our go-to place to shop. We thought it was a big place, then, but it has grown a lot since we were here.
Have you been back to Lakeland since you moved away?
Quite a few years ago I did. My grandparents lived there for many years after we moved away, and we went back to visit with them our 17th?
Pretty much every year we went for a day or two.
Well, I will tell you, if you haven't been lately, you will be very surprised there as well.
I have some of my old high school friends that still live there, and I'm on a Facebook group with them, and they keep sharing a lot of the things that have changed, I'm sure.
Florida Southern College was there when you were there. My younger son went there as a student, as a graduate, and my older son went there as dean of students for a while. But he's now in Kansas. But even in the 10 or so years I was in and out, when that's been 20 years ago, it's like not even the same place.
Yeah.
It isn't. I sang in the auditorium with our Lakeland High School Madrigal group when I was in high school. Our church pianist eventually became the director of music, the music department, Paula Porch. She became the director of music. In fact, she died last year. But yeah, I have a lot of memories of being on campus because we would go in several times a year and sing there.
Well, for our people who are not from Florida, that's a place I suggest they go because Lakeland is a beautiful town, but Florida Southern has the reputation of being the largest collection of Frank Lloyd Wright buildings anywhere in the world. So it's very interesting. Both of my sons are very tall, and they always thought that Frank Lloyd Wright did not like tall people because all the archways and everything were so. But it's beautiful, and it's continued to grow and thrive as a college.
We lived about less than a half mile from there when we lived in Lakeland.
Well, both of you have experience in what I'm getting ready to ask you. What advice would you give a young person today?
Wow. Stay true to what you believe. Don't let people sway you one way or the other. To keep your head on straight. This is what we've told our granddaughter that started college this year, to be the good person, be the kind person, to be the helpful person, and not get off on the wrong track somewhere, but to just, I know with Dan, just pursuing his goals, because we got married young, and he went to college 2 years and dropped out. We had a family, and he went back to college. So he started in 70, he graduated in 1980. But then he wanted to teach as well. So when he was in his 40s, he went back, after our kids got out of school, he went back and got his education degree and taught school for several years. And so he has always pursued, he's followed through with what he wanted to do. So my advice to young people is to decide, follow that path and stay with it.
And sometimes it's not a short path, but if it's what you really want, it's worth pursuing.
It's a roundabout path for us, yeah.
Dan, what about you?
Have patience with one another. So many young people today, they just argue about things that 50 years from now won't make a bit of difference. And I tell them, take the long view of things. There's just a lot of things you're better off just to be quiet and go on about your business. There's some things, you pick your battles, especially raising kids. We always talked about raising our kids, and there were battles we picked, and when we got into those battles, we won. But there are other things that weren't worth worrying about, all the fuss and fall. And if you do that, if you pick your battles and have patience with one another, you can last it out for 50 years.
Well, that's great advice, and thank you so much for visiting with us today. Look forward to more conversations.
We enjoyed it.
Good. And we'll tell the rest of our viewers it's not so bad, is it?
No.
Thank you again for joining us today, and come back and have another Front Porch conversation with us.